10,000 acres stretched to the horizon under winter sky. Thomas Brennan stood at the farthest boundary fence, surveying land that bore his name. New barns dotted the valley. Cattle moved in dark clusters across white fields. Hired hands worked corrals in the distance. He'd built this. 10 years of dawn-to-dusk labor. Every acre acquired, every structure raised, every head of cattle purchased, all for Sarah. The wind cut through his coat. February cold settled deep in Montana, the kind that made bones ache. He pulled his collar higher and turned toward home. The ranch house sat 3 miles back, lamplight already glowing in windows. Supper time had passed an hour ago. His horse carried him through gathering dusk. The land looked good. Better than good, empire-sized, come spring. He'd negotiate for the Peterson property another 2,000 acres. Make Sarah's name mean something that lasted. The house appeared larger than when he'd started. He'd added wings, expanded rooms, hired help to maintain what 1 man and 2 children couldn't manage alone. Light spilled from the kitchen windows. His children would be finishing their meal. Thomas stabled his horse and entered through the back door. Warmth hit his face. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, looked up from washing dishes. "Children ate already, Mr. Brennan," she said. "Kept your plate warm." "Appreciate it." He found them in the parlor. Emma, 12 now, sat reading by lamplight. Jacob, 10, worked on schoolwork at the table. They looked up when he entered. "Evening, Papa," Emma said. "Evening. How was your day?" "Fine. Finished my arithmetic." "Good girl." He turned to Jacob. "And you? Read 2 chapters for school." "That's fine." The conversation felt mechanical. Familiar words exchanged without weight. Thomas wanted to say more, but exhaustion pulled at him. The Peterson negotiation needed planning. Numbers to calculate before morning. "You 2 head to bed soon," he said. "It's getting late." "Yes, Papa." He retreated to his study and closed the door. Sarah's portrait hung above his desk, watching over ledgers and land deeds. Her face looked peaceful in the painting. She'd been 26 when the fever took her, beautiful and gone before seeing any of this. Thomas touched the frame. "All for you, Sarah. Everything I'm building." Maps covered his desk. Survey documents, expansion plans. The Peterson property would connect his northern and eastern holdings. Make the ranch a true empire. Give their children something that mattered. Outside. Wind rattled the windows. Winter showed no mercy this year, but spring would come. It always did. And with it, another year of growth. He opened the ledger and began calculating. The lamplight pushed back darkness but didn't reach far. Down the hall, he heard Emma's door close, then Jacob's. The house settled into silence. Thomas worked alone, surrounded by maps of land his wife never saw, building a legacy for a woman who couldn't tell him if she wanted it. The portrait watched. He didn't look up. The telegram arrived with the Morning Post. Thomas read it twice. Standing in his study doorway. "Mary Brennan arriving Thursday. 10-year remembrance. Hope you'll receive me. Your sister, Mary," Sarah's younger sister. He hadn't seen her since the funeral. She'd written occasionally those first years, asking about the children, offering comfort he didn't know how to accept. Eventually the letter stopped. Thursday meant 3 days. Thomas called for Mrs. Chen. "We'll have a guest. Sarah's sister. I'll need the east guest room prepared." Mrs. Chen nodded. "I'll see to it. The children will be glad for company." Would they? Emma barely remembered her aunt. Jacob had been an infant at the funeral. But Mrs. Chen was right. Visitors were rare. The ranch consumed everything. Thursday came with snow. Heavy flakes fell all morning, covering the road from town. The stage ran anyway. Montana stages didn't stop for weather. Thomas sent a hand to collect Mary from the station. He paced his study, uncertain why her visit made him anxious. The house was in order. The children well behaved. Everything ran properly. The wagon pulled up at 3:30. Thomas watched from the window as Mary climbed down. She wore traveling clothes, dark blue against the white landscape. Not as young as he remembered. Time had passed for everyone. Emma and Jacob stood beside him. "Is that Aunt Mary?" Emma asked. "It is. I don't remember her." "You were small." They went to the door together. Mary stamped snow from her boots and looked up. Her face was Sarah's face. Older but unmistakable. Same dark eyes. Same way of standing. "Thomas." She stepped forward and embraced him briefly. "Thank you for having me." "Family's always welcome." She turned to the children. "Emma, Jacob, look at you both, so grown." Emma offered a careful smile. Jacob hung back. Shy. Mary knelt and opened her arms. Emma stepped into the embrace. Jacob followed more slowly. "Your mama talked about you both constantly," Mary said. "Even before you were born, Jacob. She had names picked out, stories planned." Emma pulled back slightly. "Did she? Oh yes, come inside and I'll tell you some." They moved into the warmth. Mrs. Chen took Mary's bags. Thomas gestured toward the parlor. "You must be tired from traveling." "Some, but I'd rather visit than rest. It's been too long." That evening they gathered for supper. Mrs. Chen had prepared extra. The table felt crowded in a way it hadn't been in years. Mary asked questions easily. About school, about friends, about what they liked to do. Emma answered carefully. Jacob mostly nodded. "Your mama loves stories before bed," Mary said during dessert. "Did your papa ever tell you about the one with the singing coyote?" Emma shook her head. Jacob looked at Thomas. "I don't recall that one." Thomas said, "Sarah made it up one winter when we were girls. About a coyote who sang so beautifully that even the moon stopped to listen." Mary smiled at the memory. "She told it to me every night for a month." "What happened to the coyote?" Jacob asked quietly. "He found a family who loved his singing, made a home with them." Thomas felt something shift in the room. A presence he couldn't name. Sarah had always been good with stories. He'd forgotten that. After supper, the children went to bed. Mary sat in the parlor while Thomas added wood to the fire. "The ranch looks impressive," she said. Sarah would have been amazed. "I hope so. It's what I've been building for her." Mary didn't respond immediately. She watched the fire, her expression unreadable. "How are you?" "Thomas, really?" "Fine, busy. The operation keeps growing. And the children, they're good students, well behaved. They seem quiet." "They're always quiet." Mary nodded slowly. She looked like she wanted to say something else, but changed her mind. Instead, she stood and said goodnight. Thomas sat alone after she'd gone. The fire crackled, down the hall. He heard Mary's door close. Something about her presence felt like a question he didn't know how to answer. He pushed the thought away and went to his study. Work waited. It always did. Mary rose early and explored. Thomas watched from his study window as she walked the property. Bundled against cold, she visited the barns. Spoke with the hands. Stood for long minutes looking at structures he'd built. When she returned, he was at his desk, reviewing expansion documents. She appeared in the doorway without knocking. "May I come in?" "Of course." She entered slowly, taking in the room. Her gaze settled on Sarah's portrait above his desk. Below it, maps and deeds covered every surface, land surveys, purchase agreements, financing calculations. "You're planning more expansion," she said. "The Peterson property. 2,000 acres adjacent to our northern boundary. How large is the ranch now?" Just over 10,000 acres, 30 hired hands. Planning to increase to 60 when we acquire Peterson's land. Mary walked closer. She studied the portrait, then the papers beneath it. Is this what Sarah wanted? She asked quietly. Thomas stiffened. I built this for her, to honor her memory, to make her name mean something. Did she say she wanted that? She died before any of this was possible, before she could see what we might build. Mary turned to face him. Thomas, what did Sarah talk about when she was alive? What were her dreams? She wanted a good life for our family, security for the children. Did she say that those exact words? He tried to remember specific conversations. But the years had blurred everything into general impressions. Sarah had been young when she died. They'd barely started building the ranch. She wanted our children provided for, he said. Any mother would want that. Have you asked the children what they want? The question caught him off guard. They're children. They don't understand what's being built for them. Mary looked at the portrait again. I brought some of Sarah's letters. From before you married. From when the children were babies. Would you like to read them? Something in Thomas resisted. I don't have time right now. The Peterson negotiation needs attention. Of course. Mary moved toward the door, then paused. Thomas, when you think about Sarah, what do you see? I see her here, in this house, with our family. Do you see her with all this? Mary gestured at the maps. The empire, the expansion. Thomas had no answer. Mary left quietly. He tried to return to work but couldn't focus. Her questions circled through his mind. What had Sarah wanted? He'd been so certain for 10 years, built everything on that certainty. But when he tried to remember her voice saying she wanted any of this, he couldn't. That night, he passed the guest room. Light showed under the door. He imagined Mary inside with Sarah's letters, reading words his wife had written before the fever. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, then returned to his study and closed the door. The maps waited. The empire needed building. That's what mattered. That's what he'd convinced himself mattered. But sleep came slowly that night. And when it came, he dreamed of Sarah asking questions he couldn't answer. Mary stayed. Days passed into a week. Thomas worked while she spent time with the children. He noticed changes at supper. Emma talked more. Jacob smiled. Aunt Mary taught us a game today, Emma said one evening. With cards? Mama used to play it with her when they were young. Did she? Thomas tried to remember Sarah playing cards. The memory wouldn't come. She was very good at it, Mary said. Beat me every time, Jacob laughed. Aunt Mary let Emma win today. I did not. Your sister earned that victory fair. The children's faces looked different when Mary was present. Lighter somehow. Less careful. After they'd gone to bed. Thomas asked, What do you talk about with them? Everything. What they like. What they worry about. Normal things. They seem comfortable with you. Children need someone to listen. Mary's tone wasn't accusatory, just factual. They're hungry for attention. Mrs. Chen is here every day. Mrs. Chen is kind, but she's not family. Thomas felt the implication, but didn't know how to respond. He worked. That's what fathers did. Provided. The next day, Mary found him in the barn reviewing cattle inventory. She watched him work for a few minutes before speaking. Emma showed me her mother's locket today. She keeps it in her dresser. Sarah wore that every day. Emma barely remembers her face. She said Papa told her Mama would be proud of the ranch. She would be. I've built something lasting. Thomas, what did Sarah think about ranching? He set down his ledger. What do you mean, when you were married? When the children were babies? Did she talk about wanting a big operation, about expansion, about becoming wealthy? Thomas thought back. Those early years had been simple. A small homestead, barely 100 acres. Sarah had kept house, tended a garden, cared for the babies. They'd talked about what had they talked about. She wanted the children raised well. He said, "That's not what I asked." "What are you getting at?" "Mary." She moved closer. "I'm trying to understand what you're building, and why. Because the children barely know you. You work from dawn past dark. You're planning to double your operation. And you keep saying it's all for Sarah." "It is. Or is it something else?" Thomas felt anger rising. "I've given 10 years to honoring her memory. Every decision I've made has been for her." "Then why do your children eat supper alone every night? Why do they speak carefully around you like you're a stranger? Why does Jacob tell me he wants to learn ranching, but you say he has to wait until the operation is bigger?" The words hit like accusations. Thomas gripped the ledger. "I'm building their future. Are you building something for yourself?" She left him standing there. Thomas looked at the cattle, the barn, the land stretching beyond, everything he'd accomplished, everything he'd sacrificed for. That night at supper, he watched his children, really watched them. They answered his questions in short sentences, looked at their plates more than at him, brightened only when Mary spoke. When had that happened? When had they become strangers living in his house? He remembered Emma as a toddler, following him everywhere, Jacob as a baby, crying until Thomas held him. When had they stopped reaching for him after the children went to bed? Thomas found Mary in the parlor. "I should read those letters," he said. She looked up from her book, studied his face, then nodded and stood. "I'll get them." Mary returned with a small wooden box. She set it on the table between them. The firelight made shadows dance across its surface. "These are from different times," she said. "Before marriage, after the children, some from near the end." Thomas opened the box. Letters lay folded inside, Sarah's handwriting visible on each one. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the first. "Would you like me to read them?" Mary asked. "Or would you prefer to read alone? You read, please." Mary selected one carefully. "This is from before your wedding. Sarah was 18. She unfolded it and began. "Dearest Mary, Thomas asked me yesterday what I wanted most from our life together. I told him a home filled with laughter, children who know their parents' voices, a table where we gather and share our days. He laughed and said those were small dreams. But I don't think they're small at all. I think they're everything. I want a life measured in moments, not in things. I want to remember our days together, not count our possessions. Is that foolish? Am I asking for too little?" Mary paused. Thomas sat very still. That's her writing. Yes, she was always like that, content with simple things. Thomas thought about his expansion plans, his negotiations, his drive to build bigger, acquire more, employ 60 men instead of 30. Read another. Mary selected a second letter. This is from after Emma was born. Mary, being a mother is everything I hoped. Emma is perfect. Thomas works so hard to provide for us. But sometimes I wish he'd just sit with us. I want Emma to remember her father's face more than his hard work. I want her to know his laugh, not just his sacrifice. I try to tell him this, but he thinks I'm being silly. Maybe I am, but I'd trade a bigger ranch for more evenings by our fire. The words struck deep. Thomas remembered those years. He'd been building, always building. Convinced Sarah needed security more than presence. Is there more? Several more. Mary's voice was gentle. Do you want to continue? Yes. She read letter after letter. Sarah's voice emerged from the pages young, hopeful, increasingly wistful. She wrote about wanting simple dinners together, about hoping Thomas would take time to play with the children, about dreams of a quiet life where love mattered more than legacy. Finally, Mary reached for one more letter. This is the last one. She wrote it during the fever. The writing is barely legible. Thomas leaned forward. Mary's voice wavered as she read. Mary, if something happens to me, promise you'll tell Thomas the children need him more than anything else. More than money. More than a big ranch. More than security. They need their father's time and attention and love. Tell him I'd trade everything we have for more mornings waking up together. Tell him I don't care if we're rich. I just want him present. Present with our babies. Present in our life. Tell him that matters more than anything he could build. Promise me. Mary. Mary folded the letter. Tears ran down her face. Thomas couldn't speak. The words hammered through his defenses. Sarah's actual voice. Her real wishes. Not what he'd imagined she wanted. Not what he'd convinced himself she would have wanted. She'd wanted him present. She'd wanted simple family life. She'd wanted moments, not monuments. And he'd spent 10 years building the opposite. Thomas, Mary said quietly, what you've built is impressive, but it's not what Sarah asked for. He looked at the letters scattered on the table. His wife's handwriting. Her dreams written in ink that hadn't faded. I thought I was honoring her. I know. But you were honoring your grief, not her memory. The truth settled like a weight. 10 years. 10,000 acres. 30 hired hands. Expansion plans. All of it built on a foundation of misunderstanding. Sarah had wanted him, present, home, with their children. Instead, he'd given her name to an empire and given their children an absent father. Thomas stood and walked to the window. Snow fell outside. Inside. Sarah's letters told him he'd been wrong about everything that mattered. What do I do now? He asked. Mary didn't answer immediately. When she spoke, her voice held both sorrow and hope. You honor what she actually wanted. You still can. Thomas didn't sleep. He sat in his study and read every letter himself. Sarah's handwriting blurred as dawn approached. By morning light. He understood completely. He'd built a monument to a woman who wanted a home. Created an empire for someone who dreamed small. Spent 10 years betraying the very wishes he claimed to honor. At breakfast, he could barely look at his children. They sat across from him, eating quietly. Strangers he'd created by choosing land over them. I have work, he said, standing abruptly. Emma and Jacob barely glanced up. They were used to his departures. Thomas walked his property with new eyes. Every barn accused him. Every acre mocked his devotion. He told himself this was for Sarah. Told himself she'd be proud. But Sarah's letters said otherwise. She'd wanted him home for supper. Wanted him playing with their babies. Wanted moments instead of monuments. He'd given her the opposite and called it love. By midday, he found himself at the farthest boundary again, the place where he often stood surveying his achievement. Now it looked different, vast and empty, a graveyard of misplaced devotion. Mary found him there in late afternoon. You've been gone all day. The children asked about you. What did you tell them? That you were thinking. Thomas turned to her. How long have you known that I was building the wrong thing? Since the funeral. You talked about making her name matter, about building something worthy of her memory. I thought it was grief talking. But then the letters kept coming about expansion, about growth, about legacy, and I knew. Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened? He wouldn't have. He'd been too certain, too driven, too convinced his empire was tribute. She wanted me home, he said. She wanted me present with our children. Instead, I've been out here, alone, building something she never asked for. Yes, I've wasted 10 years. Not wasted, misdirected. Mary moved closer. But you can change direction. Thomas, it's not too late. The children barely know me. I've been a stranger in their lives. Then stop being a stranger. Start being their father. Thomas looked at her. What would that look like? Smaller, simpler, present. What Sarah actually wanted. The wind carried snow across the empty fields. His empire stretched beyond sight, beautiful and hollow. I don't know if I can undo this. You can't undo it, but you can choose differently going forward. That evening, Mary sat with the children while Thomas remained in his study. He looked at the expansion plans, the Peterson property documents, the projections for 60 hired hands. Sarah's portrait watched from above. He remembered her alive, young, laughing. She'd been happiest in small moments, morning coffee together, reading to Emma, rocking Jacob to sleep. She'd never talked about wealth or empire. He'd invented those dreams and attributed them to her. At supper, Mary watched him struggle. The children ate quietly, used to his silence, but this silence felt different, heavier, after they'd gone to bed. Thomas spoke. I need to tell you something, he said to Mary, about why I built all this. I'm listening. When Sarah died, I felt powerless. I couldn't save her, couldn't protect her from the fever. I was useless. His voice roughened. So I thought if I could create something big enough, important enough, lasting enough, then her death would mean something. Then I'd have done something that mattered. Oh, Thomas. But I built it for me, not for her. I built it to feel less powerless. And I told myself it was for her memory. He looked at the letters on the table. I've been lying to myself for 10 years. Mary reached across and took his hand. Now you know the truth. Now you can do better. Can I? They don't even know me. Then let them get to know you. Be the father Sarah wanted them to have. Thomas sat in the quiet. Outside. Winter held the land. Inside. Truth held him. He'd spent a decade building the wrong legacy. Time to build the right one. If it wasn't too late, if his children could forgive a father who chose land over them for 10 years, if he could forgive himself, days passed. Thomas went through the motions, but his heart wasn't in the work. The hired hands noticed. His foreman asked if something was wrong. Just thinking about changes. Thomas said, what kind of changes? Haven't decided yet. But he had decided. He just didn't know how to begin. Mary continued spending time with Emma and Jacob. Thomas watched from a distance. She read to them, played games, listened to their stories. Simple things that should have been his to give. One night, Emma had a nightmare. Thomas heard her crying from his room down the hall. He rose, moving toward her door, but Mary was already there, coming from the guest room. Thomas stood in the hallway as Mary entered Emma's room. He heard soft voices, comfort being given, his daughter's tears quieting. He should be doing that. He was her father, but he didn't know how anymore. Didn't know what to say, how to comfort. He'd spent 10 years away from these moments. Mary emerged and found him standing there in the shadows. She was dreaming about her mother. Mary said quietly. Happens sometimes around the anniversary. I should have gone to her. You can next time. She needs to know you're there. They walked to the parlor. Thomas added wood to the dying fire. Mary sat and waited. I don't know how to be what they need, he finally said. I've been absent so long. They're used to managing without me. So stop being absent. Start small. Eat breakfast with them. Ask about their day and actually listen. Read to them before bed. Be present. What about the ranch? What about it? Does it need to be this big? Do you need 60 hands? Do you need the Peterson property? Thomas thought about expansion plans gathering dust on his desk, about negotiations he'd been postponing, about the empire that suddenly felt like a burden instead of an achievement. Sarah never wanted this, he said. I built my grief into 10,000 acres, called it devotion. Yes. But you can build something different now. Something she actually dreamed of. A home, not an empire. Yes. Thomas stared at the fire. I'll need to sell property, reduce operations, let men go. Will that destroy you? No. It'll probably save me. Mary smiled. Then do it. Build what Sarah wanted, while there's still time. But doing it meant admitting 10 years of error, meant watching his empire crumble, meant choosing smallness over significance. I'm afraid, Thomas admitted. Afraid the children won't forgive me. Afraid I've lost too much time. You have lost time, that's true. But you haven't lost them. Not yet. They're still here. Still hoping their father will see them. How do you know? Because Emma told me. She said sometimes she pretends Papa is too busy to spend time with them. But really, she thinks, maybe he just doesn't want to. The words cut deep. She thinks I don't want to be with them. Children think what they see. And what they see is a father who chooses his work over them every single day. Thomas felt the weight of it. 10 years of choices. 10 years of priorities that put empire over family. Sarah had warned him in those letters. She'd wanted him present. He'd given her memory everything except what she'd actually asked for. I'll change, he said. Starting tomorrow. Good, because they need you, Thomas, and Sarah wanted them to have you. That night, Thomas lay awake thinking. Change meant sacrifice, meant admitting failure, meant becoming smaller in the world's eyes. But Sarah's letters had shown him the truth. The world's eyes didn't matter. His children's eyes did. He rose before dawn and made a decision. By breakfast, he knew what needed to be done. Emma and Jacob came to the table to find their father already there, not in his study preparing for work. Morning, Thomas said. I thought we'd eat together today. The children exchanged glances. Emma sat carefully. Jacob looked uncertain. Mrs. Chen made biscuits. Thomas said, Your favorite. Emma. Yes. Papa. They ate in awkward silence at first, but Thomas asked questions. Real questions. About what they were learning, what they liked, what they hoped for. The children answered haltingly. But they answered. After breakfast, Thomas asked if they'd like to walk with him, just around the yard, just to spend time. Emma looked at Mary. Mary nodded encouragingly. All right, Emma said. They walked in morning cold. Thomas pointed out things he'd built, talked about the land, but mostly he listened as Emma told him about a book she was reading. As Jacob described a game he'd invented, small moments, simple time together, what Sarah had wanted all along. When they returned to the house, Mary was waiting. That was good, she said after the children had gone inside. It was a start. Yes, it was. Thomas looked at her, this woman who'd brought truth and disruption and hope. Thank you, he said, for coming, for showing me what I'd become. I didn't come to judge you. I know, but you did judge me. And you were right. Mary smiled. Now the real work begins. Building what Sarah wanted. Not an empire. A home. Thomas nodded. The empire had been easier to build. This would require everything he had, but it's what Sarah had asked for, and it's what his children deserved. Time to honor her wishes. Finally, properly, the way love should have honored them all along, Thomas started selling property. First the distant parcels, then the recent acquisitions. By spring, the ranch had shrunk to 5,000 acres, then 3,000, finally to a manageable 2,000. He let most of the hired hands go with good references and fair severance, kept only 5 men, enough to run the operation, not enough to require his constant absence. The work consumed him differently now. Not building bigger, but building better. Not expanding, but consolidating. Not achieving, but repairing. His children watched the transformation with confusion at first, then with cautious hope. Thomas ate breakfast with them every morning, joined them for supper every evening, read to them before bed, asked about their days and listened to the answers. It was awkward. He didn't always know what to say. Sometimes silence stretched uncomfortable. But he stayed present, showed up, tried. Emma began sharing more. Jacob smiled easier. Small changes, but changes nonetheless. Mary watched it all, helped bridge the gaps, showed Thomas how to be a father again, reminded him of the man Sarah had married. One afternoon in late March, Thomas found her in the garden plot near the house. She was planning where to plant once the ground thawed. Sarah loved gardens, Mary said. She'd spend hours out here, said it reminded her that beautiful things take time and care. Thomas knelt beside her. I'd forgotten she gardened. You forgot a lot of things, but you're remembering now? He looked at the empty plot. Soon there would be green growth, life returning, symbol of what was happening in his house too. Mary, I need to ask you something. She turned to him. Stay, he said. Don't go back. Stay and help me build what Sarah wanted. Help me raise these children the way she dreamed they'd be raised. Thomas, I'm not asking you to replace her. No one could. But you carry her wisdom, her kindness, her vision of what family should be. He met her eyes. The children need you, and I need help honoring my wife's real wishes. Mary was quiet for a long moment. She looked at the house, at the smaller ranch, at the man who'd finally chosen right priorities. Are you sure this is a big ask? I've never been more sure of anything. I spent 10 years building the wrong legacy. I want to build the right one now, but I can't do it alone. He paused. Will you help me build what Sarah actually wanted, a home, not an empire? Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. Yes, I'll help you. Thomas felt relief wash through him. Thank you. But Thomas, this isn't just about the children or honoring Sarah. What do you want? He thought about it. Really thought, I want my children to know their father. I want to stop building monuments to grief. I want to live the kind of life Sarah dreamed of, simple, present, measured in moments. He looked at Mary. And I want help. I want partnership. I want what she wanted, a home filled with love and laughter. Then we'll build that together. That evening, Thomas gathered his children in the parlor. Mary sat with them. I have something to tell you both, Thomas began. Aunt Mary is going to stay with us. Permanently. Emma's face lit up. Really? Really? If that's all right with you? Yes, Emma said quickly. Jacob nodded eagerly. Good, because I need help. I need help being a better father. Help building the kind of home your mother wanted for you. He looked at his children. I'm sorry I've been absent. Sorry I chose the wrong things to build. But I'm choosing differently now. Emma stood and crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him. Jacob followed. They held each other, tentative but real. When they pulled back, Thomas saw tears on Emma's face. We thought you didn't want to be with us, she said quietly. Oh, sweetheart, I always wanted to be with you. I just forgot how, but I'm learning again. Will you keep learning? Every day, I promise. Later, after the children slept, Thomas and Mary walked outside. Stars filled the sky. Spring was coming. You could smell it in the air. Winter's breaking, Mary said. Yes, in more ways than one. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Thomas spoke again. Mary, there's something else I want to say. I'm not asking now, just letting you know. He turned to her. When enough time has passed, when it feels right, I'd like this to be more than you helping. I'd like this to be partnership. Real partnership. Mary looked at him steadily. Are you proposing, not yet, but someday, if you'd consider it? He paused. Not to replace Sarah, to honor her, to build the life she wanted. Together. Mary smiled. Ask me again when spring arrives fully, when the garden is planted and the children are settled, when you're sure. I'm sure now. Then ask me in spring. I'll give you my answer then. Thomas nodded. Fair enough. He'd rushed things before, built too fast. This time he'd do it right. Build slow and sure. The way love was meant to be built, the way Sarah had wanted all along. Spring came with morning warmth and evening birdsong. The garden sprouted under Mary's care. Thomas worked the ranch with his small crew, present for breakfast and home before dark. The children blossomed like the garden. Emma laughed more. Jacob talked more. They ran in the yard after school, helped with chores, sat at supper sharing their days. One evening in April, Thomas found Emma looking at her mother's locket. Tell me about Mama, she said. What was she like? Thomas sat beside his daughter. For once, the memories came easily. She was kind. Patient. She loved simple things. Mornings together. Stories before bed. She wanted you to grow up knowing you were loved. Not knowing you were provided for. Did she love you? Very much. And I loved her. Still do. Can you love someone new too and still love Mama? Thomas understood the question. Yes. Love doesn't run out. And your Mama wanted us to be happy. All of us. Together. Emma nodded. I like Aunt Mary. I do too. Is she going to stay forever? Would you like that? Yes. She feels like family. Not like Mama, but like someone who should be here. I think so too. That night. Thomas found Mary on the porch. Stars emerged overhead. The air smelled of growing things. Walk with me? He asked. They walked to the garden. Young plants pushed through soil. Promise of summer harvest ahead. It's really spring now, Thomas said. It is. You told me to ask again when spring arrived fully. Mary turned to him. I remember. Mary, you brought truth when I needed it. Showed me how I'd betrayed Sarah's real wishes. Helped me become the father she wanted me to be. He took her hand. Now I want to build the rest of it. The home she dreamed of. The life she described in her letters. But I don't want to build it alone. I want to build it with you, as partners, as family, as more. Mary smiled. Are you proposing, Thomas Brennan? I am not asking you to replace Sarah. Asking you to help fulfill her wishes, to raise these children together, to build what she actually wanted, a home filled with love, not an empire filled with absence. He paused. Will you marry me? Will you help me honor her properly? Finally. Mary looked at the garden, at the smaller ranch, at the man who'd finally learned to build the right things. Yes, she said. I'll marry you. I'll help you build what my sister wanted, what I want too. A home. A family. A life measured in moments? Thomas pulled her close. They stood together under stars, surrounded by evidence of new growth. The empire was gone. The home remained, by summer. They'd married quietly. The children called Mary Mother gradually, naturally, without being asked. Sarah's portrait moved from Thomas's study to above the family hearth, watching over what she'd actually wanted all along. One evening in late summer, Thomas read to his children while Mary mended nearby. Simple moment. Unremarkable to anyone watching, but to Thomas, it was everything. This was the legacy. Not acres but attention, not wealth but presence, not monuments but moments. He caught Mary's eye across the room. She smiled. They were building it, Finally, the life Sarah had described in her letters, the dream she'd held before fever took her. After the children went to bed, Thomas stepped outside briefly. The smaller ranch stretched into twilight. Only 2,000 acres now. Only 5 hands. Only what was needed. In the distance, he could see where the boundary fence used to run, where he used to stand surveying his empire. Now there was just land. Manageable land. Land that served life instead of consuming it. Behind him, lamplight glowed in windows. Inside, his family gathered, Mary putting away mending, children sleeping peacefully. A home, not a monument. Thomas whispered to the wind, to whatever remained of Sarah in this place they'd shared. I understand now. Finally, it was never about the empire. It was always about this, about being present, about building a home where love lived. He paused. I'm sorry it took me so long to hear you, but I'm honoring your wishes now, the real ones, the ones you wrote down, the ones I should have listened to all along. The wind carried his words away. Spring had become summer. Summer would become fall. Seasons turning. Life continuing. The way it was meant to. Thomas went back inside, closed the door behind him. The warmth surrounded him. His children breathing in sleep down the hall. His wife, Sarah's sister. His partner in honoring Sarah's memory moving quietly through the house, turning down lamps. The ranch was smaller, but the home was fuller. The empire had been grand. But this simple, present, moment-filled life, this was what Sarah had wanted. This was what love looked like when you finally learned to build it right. Thomas sat by the dying fire and felt peace settle. 10 years of wrong building. But the right building had begun, and would continue, day by day, moment by moment, just as Sarah had dreamed, just as love required. Finally, home.